everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about astrology, Vedic astrology in particular. And I'm talking to you on Tuesday, February 9th, 2021, right in the middle of the Trump impeachment trial, or actually right at the beginning of it. And I thought it might be useful to look at that just for a little bit. We have a special guest over here behind me. By the way, I'm coming to you courtesy of Greater New Bedford Cable Television Access. There wants to allow me to appear on the local cable television. And I also have a YouTube channel, which you're probably aware of if you're looking at this video. We are planning on improving it. We've been stuck with some personal stuff, not bad, but busy. And so I wasn't able to put a video out last week. I'm going to try to correct that as much as I possibly can. And so you can contact me for readings, for lessons at my phone number, which is at the end of this video, 508-525, my cell number, 508-525-0001. Or you can contact me at Crystal Expectations at 508-990-7898. Or NEIVAS at Comcast.net. I'm also a teacher. I've been a professional Vedic astrologer for 30 years. And I've also written several articles for Modern Astrologer and astrological magazines around the world. And I'm also a Swami of the Temple of Kriya Yoga out of Chicago, etc., etc., etc. So, what I'd like to talk about is I'm going to talk about the chart today. I'm going to talk about how it's going to impact the impeachment trial. And I'm also going to talk about some new events I see coming up over the next few months. And finally, I'll end up with individual astrological forecasts. I had, or a sign astrological forecast, excuse me. I had mentioned I was going to do a Chinese New Year. We're entering the year of the ox on February 12th, and I will do that very, very soon. But I want to touch on some things that are happening right now in society, and also some things in general that might be affecting you personally. So there are indications by sign, but there are also indications by, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it, by, as one of my students put it, the astrological weather changes. Okay, so at certain points you'll see more panic in the air. At certain points you'll see more calm in the air, and these are actually astrologically determined. These aren't things that people just, and how we react to these largely depends on how successful we are in navigating through our desires for what we want to do with our lives, and also in how we interact with others. So there may be a good time to do something. There may be a time to just lay back and let other people do what they need to do. And astrology is perfectly helpful in determining when it's a good time to do things and not to do things. And I'm not talking about things the most commonly known astrological configuration that affects people's daily lives is they know about the full moon, and they also know about about Mercury retrograde. So Mercury retrograde is a fairly common phenomenon. Full moon happens once a month. Mercury retrograde happens 3 times a year. We're in a Mercury retrograde period right now as I speak. So essentially, Mercury retrograde is not as damaging as most people think it is. It is bad for communications, and I can identify a typical Mercury retrograde problem in that yesterday I had another computer that I use, and all of a sudden I couldn't get it to start. I couldn't get it to power up. After I thought about it, I realized it had overcharged. I'd had a common problem with another computer, And essentially, that was what the problem was. So there's a little thing you can do on some computers where there's like a reset or a static electricity discharge button, and I pressed that, and the problem was solved. So a lot of Mercury retrograde problems are actually, and a lot of planetary problems are actually generated by our reaction to these things. So if we learn to react calmly, there are times when you have to act aggressively or more forcefully. There's no question. But most of the time, if you stop and take a step back and pull back just a little, it'll be easier for you to get what you want and also to get to keep your environment sane. And so I can't stress that enough. I think that a lot of people think that astrology, and there's an old expression which I heard many, many years ago: the stars impel, they do not compel. And that's an old astrological cliche, but it's very true, even in a formula which is as prone to predictive. Um, it's a predictive tool as much as Vedic astrology is. Vedic astrology prides itself on prediction, and it is an except. And Western astrology does a fine job in predicting as well, but there are things that can be affected by our reactions, by our levels of action in life. So there are also things we can say, well, I can't do it today, but I'm going to get back and do it tomorrow. Or I can do it later on. I don't have to do it when I'm feeling super stressed out. I can do things a bit later in the day. So I think that keeping those things in mind, or I can do things later on this week, like it's not procrastination, or I can do things a little bit earlier and try to avoid this mounting tension I'm feeling as I'm facing a task. And keep in mind, the more positive energy you put out, the more positive energy you'll be received by. And sometimes you can say, well, Gary, I don't feel very positive today. That's okay. Just smile, just act positive. Pretty soon you'll feel positive because emotions tend to build on themselves. After a while, if you start to say to yourself, well, I lost that, or I misplaced that, or I didn't get that, there's always something else I can focus on. There's always something else that I can, excuse me, I'm getting a, there's always something else you can focus on. And I think that one of the things that life teaches us is the more determined, the more patient, the better prepared we are, the more likely it is we'll get what we want. Okay, it's no guarantee, but it's likely. Or you'll get something extraordinarily close to it. Okay, so just keep those, just to encourage you through these difficult times. Everybody's experiencing really negative energy, in part because of the obvious conditions we're all working under in this lockdown state we're in right now. We're not really in a lockdown, but you know what I mean. And fear. And there's a lot of fear just in general in the world right now. And let's look at the chart and see what's causing that. Okay. So I'm going to dish this screen. I'm going to pull up what's called a now chart for New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is what I normally do when I start these broadcasts. Two new courses, just to let you know, two new courses starting in Kepler 1 on what's called Gemini Astrology. That'll start in April. And that's a special technique of Vedic astrology, which uses sign aspects. And it's really interesting and very accurate. And one of them was called a Varshapal chart, which will happen about a month after that. So that's something to keep your eyes open for. Also, excuse me, I have a friend. Okay, that was a special guest star who's decided to rummage through my laptop case. So, all right, so we have a chart. This is a New Bedford, Massachusetts chart. So I don't know if you can see the signs from where you are. I'm going to see if I can share the signs, share the chart. It's always good if you can share the screen, right? Right, Gary, right. Okay, so let's share the screen. Share the chart. So this is, okay, I hope you can see it. But if you look at the chart really carefully, you can see we have a Gemini in the first house. And you'll see this little guy, K2, in the sixth house. Now, K2's the South Lunar Node. It's in Scorpio right now. So a lot of people who have Scorpio rising signs or Scorpio suns, this is between roughly November 15th and December 15th, will be having a kind of a confused experience right now, or they'll be feeling hyper, they'll be either confused and directionless or hyper focused. But what I want to draw your attention to is this cluster of planets over here in the sign Capricorn. So we have Sun's in Capricorn. Mercury's retrograde. That underline means it's retrograde in Capricorn. Venus is in Capricorn. Moon just entered Capricorn. Jupiter's in Capricorn. And we have Pluto, although I don't use Pluto all that much in my own practice. Pluto is also in Capricorn. So that house is kind of jam-packed. Mars is in Aries. That's really, and Rahu's in Taurus, which is Libra sign. K2 is in Scorpio, which is Mars sign in Indian astrology. But all the action is happening is in Capricorn. So what does that mean in practical terms? Well, a lot of attention on leadership, on executive branch, on government right now. Just a ton, right? So this makes sense. We have an impeachment trial going on. We just had a transition of presidents. And with this particular sign, now one thing that happens is that Saturn as a planet tends to disrupt what it's with. It's in its own sign, so it's relatively stable. There is a heavy emphasis on stability, on trying to make things return to a more peaceful or more quiet time. Now, you have to keep in mind that Saturn's a bit of a dictator planet, too. So, what does that mean in plain English? And this isn't a politicization. I've noticed in my practice that people who tend to assume positions of leadership that have strong Saturns will do a lot of what I call executive orders or mandates. And that's actually it's not, I'm not saying it's not essential from time to time, but that it is an example of executive authority, essentially of saying, I'm going to tell you to do this and you're going to do it. Okay. So it's perfectly legal. There's nothing illegal, immoral, or fattening about it. But it is a sign of the current administration. And basically, okay. And basically, this combination, the Sun Saturn combination, tends to put a lot of authority in the leadership. Now, the things that sort of fight against that is you have Jupiter in here. Now, Jupiter's debilitated in this sign. It isn't well placed in this sign. There's a phenomenon in Indian astrology called cancellation of debilitation. So essentially what that means is when a planet is in a sign, there are a lot of factors that can cancel debilitation and it can make the planet actually strong. But when the planet is in the same sign as a planet that's in its own sign, and Saturn's in its own sign in Capricorn, so that cancellation gets knocked out to a certain extent. However, a lot of my fellow astrologers have noted through the years the cancellation of debilitation tends not to be eliminated entirely. It tends to be modified. It tends to be lessened in its severity. So if Jupiter's debilitated, what normally happens is you have bad judgment. What normally happens is you have not over optimism, you'll have caution in doing the right thing. You'll have a temptation to make a mandate and stick strictly to it. So there's no wiggle room in interpretation. So that's one of the things a debilitated Jupiter in Capricorn does. It also means, to a certain extent, there's a certain willingness to overlook tradition, to overlook precedent if Jupiter's debilitated. If the debilitation is canceled, that offsets a little bit. Now, this planet's in the same sign with the sun, so that does indicate extreme authority on the part of the government. Jupiter's debilitated, so the courts aren't going to get involved, and we know that Justice Roberts is not going to be presiding over the impeachment trial. The moon is there, so the public consciousness is on the trial right now. That's the general public is governed by the moon. And Venus and Mercury are there too. So there's going to be a lot of arguing and a lot of fighting back and forth. These are all kind of common sense things you'd expect with an impeachment trial. But this is going to try to mandate a change or try to provoke some kind of action, because Capricorn's an action house. It's not a philosophical house, it's an action house. So over the next few weeks, in particular through February 15th, a lot of focus is going to be on, number one, financial matters. Number two, but the impeachment is going to override that like crazy over the next couple of weeks. And you'll start to see a shift around 2 weeks from now. And that's mainly because, actually within about 3 days from now, because the sun's about to change signs around February 14th, sun goes into Aquarius. So the sun will tend to go more towards trying to help people, more focus on cures and on medicines and things like that. So you'll start to actually see some kind of control over the medicines that are going out for the coronavirus. So that'll be a good thing. But you'll also have, I think, because the sun's going into Saturday, and you'll also have quite a few more cures or quite a few more vaccines show up between February 14th and March 14th. And that's mainly because there'll be a lot of additional products, and that's mainly because the sun will be in Dhanishta Nakshatra and then in Satabhishak Nakshatra. Satabhishak is 100 doctors. It's 100 stars, but it's also 100 doctors. So Satabhishak Nakshatra will actually get the government more directly involved in the cure or the vaccination dissemination, and you'll actually see more vaccines come out next month. The other thing is Venus is going to be leaving this sign in about 2 weeks as well. So Venus will go into Aquarius. It'll tend to get more, people will tend to focus more on medical matters, more on social matters, more focus on getting stimulus checks out. And what we'll have is Mercury and Jupiter. The moon is going to leave the sign in about 2 days. So, I mean, the big drama around the beginning of the impeachment will be gone within about 2 days. The outcome of, so Venus will start to focus more. Venus is one of the rulers of allopathic medicine. That is the medicine we've grown up with. Homeopathic is the more traditional, or is connected with Ayurveda or connected with with less orthodox medical treatments. And Venus tends to rule over those kinds of medicines because it's essentially the planet that rules over chemistry, music, physics, art. But 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 if we're talking about medicine, it rules over allopathic or conventional medicine. The so you're going to start to see more focus on that over the next couple of weeks. The other thing is, if you have this kind of a combination happening, and I want to pull up Donald Trump's chart just for a second. But if you want to see this kind of a pattern happening, uh, you'll start to see a lot less focus on the impeachment. But I think because of when it started, the moon's in Uttarashada Nakshatra, which is a sun-ruled nakshatra. And let's see now. Uttarashada will essentially be very strong on governmental authority, very strong on. So just based upon the practical politics of it, this isn't astrology. It's just based upon the practical politics of it. This is former President Trump's chart. Chotri Maharash's. So he had a kind of a bad month through January 28th. So on March 16th, let me see now, he enters a new subperiod. And that will probably be overall good for him. A lot of planets, now this is one of the reasons for the impeachment, at least from an astrological perspective. I'm not talking about from a legal perspective. One of the reasons he's being tried a second time is mainly because he has a lot of planets in his sixth house, which is a house of lawsuits. He's going to be facing more lawsuits over the next year and a half, over the next year and a half to 2 years, to be truthful. So, but also the sixth house is a house where things gradually get better. So you will see a little bit of a recovery. I'm tending to predict that at least at the beginning of the trial, things will not go well for him between now and March 8th, because he's in the sun major planetary period, then in this really rotten moon subperiod. In terms of his chart, it's really, really bad. But I think after March 8th to March 16th, I think actually the trial is going to be over sooner than we expect. I think it'll be over by March 16th, mainly because this Mars period, Mars is his Raj Yoga Karaka planet, and it'll tend to be more favorable to him. The other thing is, he enters a Jupiter subperiod after March 16th. That doesn't get him out of lawsuits, but his Jupiter is also extremely powerful in stationary direct. But if they rush and they decide to vote between this period, there is a possibility they'll try for an insurrection vote, which I'm still not sure will pass. So if they make a decision to, essentially stop the impeachment, all right, during this sub period, they might go for an insurrection vote, and essentially the purpose of that would be to bar him from holding future office. I personally don't think that'll be successful, but I'm not really betting the bank on that. And the main reason I'm not is because he's in a really difficult subperiod. Saturn's a really horrible planet for him. Saturn's in his 12th house of loss, and it hasn't been favorable for him so far. So this is going to be the most important planet you look at in a Mahadasha. Saturn's going to be the most important planet. And also, his subperiod, this February 24th to March 8th subperiod, is really very, very rough for him. So if he makes it through that, If he makes it to the March 8th period, or if they decide before then to essentially throw it out. But this may be a point at which they say, well, if we're not going to impeach, we're going to do something which will stop him from running from office again. If they can hold that vote off between February 24th and March 8th, he he'll be he should be found free of the charges of inciting an insurrection. Um, and but I do know, at least from my studies of astrology, that this planetary pattern, a lot's going to determine, and this is one thing I'm a little bit cautious about, is Mr. Trump is not known for his humility. President Trump is not known for his humility. So he may very well say something very stupid during this period, before the February 24th to March 8th period, which will make it difficult for people to defend him. I'm just being honest with my audience, and I think that that's really where his danger lies. This is really his danger period between February 24th and March 8th. Okay, but again, there are people who would undoubtedly like to see that happen. I'm not one of them, not necessarily because I'm even advocating for Mr. Trump, but because I think that I'm disturbed by this combination. I think we're going to see increasing pressure for political censorship over the next couple of years in the United States. And I think it'll be done for the same reason that we engaged in the war on terror in 2001. That is, we'll have a bunch of people who are, and it's a lot less dangerous to us now, at least from what I've seen than I could from charts in the 1980s and 1990s. A lot of people should know that a lot of these right-wing organizations started up during the latter half of the Reagan administration. They didn't start up like within the past 10 years. So these are, and they started even earlier than that. So I think that to make Trump a scapegoat actually encourages these groups. It'll actually make things worse. To apply more domestic surveillance terror activity will actually make things worse. And if we go back to the U.S. chart, and then we'll go to the world chart in a second. The U.S. chart, just for a second. So I'm not speaking as a partisan here. I'm just speaking as a concerned citizen. If we go back to the U.S. chart, there is a Rahu period, or what I would call a panic period, between March 1st and March 25th. This will probably give a little bit of panic in terms of the economy. It'll definitely give panic in terms of the media. The media coverage will be beyond the pale. And this isn't Democrat or Republican. This is all sides of the political spectrum. And if we're looking about some potential for violence, we're looking at some potential for violence, both in the February 19th period and also February 25th, and also around March 24th. We're looking at in terms of threats of domestic terrorism. However, in the U.S. chart, this Rahu period is also a period of surveillance. Okay, so increased surveillance, increased security, etc., etc. So, not really optimistic about this trial being, and it's mainly because I don't think it's good for anybody. I don't think it's really good for the country. A censure probably would have been more effective and more meaningful if they wanted to go that route, if at all. And I think they're just really stoking the flames. Okay, so I mean, they're prosecuting, they're finding the people who actually caused the actual riot. I'm not defending any person either way. Okay, I don't have all the evidence in front of me, and I think one of the things I've been disappointed by is I've seen a lot of commentary online, which essentially just acts like it's a done deal based upon what they've seen when they haven't seen everything. So like I said, it kind of disappoints me, but I'm not surprised. I'm not really surprised. And believe me, I'm not taking a superior position here. I could be totally wrong. So so just so you know, I'm not sitting here like, oh, these poor stupid people, what are they doing? That's not the idea. It's just really that Jupiter Saturn conjunction, very rigid. It's a very rigid combination. And it, it lacks layers of subtlety, which I think are warranted to investigate. All right, so let's go back to the now chart, and we'll look around the world a little bit. Okay. Take our focus away from the United States. And I'm just using my location just because the time zone is set for that. And so let's see what's going on. So we have, all right, so we have the Mars Uranus conjunction. That was essentially, we had a glacier burst in India, which I believe I said there was going to be some problems in India in my last broadcast, and there were. So let's go over to the map of the world. But these things, if you have a lot of eighth house planets in the chart, this could be where some of my suspicion is coming from, because all these planets are essentially in jail. That's what the eighth house is. It's like being confined or being obstructed. So these are circumstances we really can't reach. We really can't do anything meaningful about. Okay, so I can't influence um, what's happening in Congress. I can't influence what's happening in the White House. Not really in any meaningful way. And I'm studying this from an astrological perspective. But there are a lot of things happening, at least at the time that I'm pulling up this chart. There are a lot of things happening behind closed doors. Maybe deals are being reached or agreements are being made right now that we just can't see. And that's not paranoia. That's just the way the business is done in politics. It's not really, it's not really I'm not saying there's a conspiracy happening here. I'm just saying this is what happens behind the scenes. This is normal political behavior. So, so again, essentially, there's a lot we're not seeing right now. There's a little bit we're seeing, and that's the Mars. Okay, so it's an attack planet, and if people are making arguments, that's what we're seeing right now. But we're not seeing a lot of the legal discussions or um, the potential for lying or the potential for telling the truth with this combination. Okay, so just to keep in mind, right now, what you're seeing on television is not really what's happening in terms of the decision making that's going on. And like I said, it's not a conspiracy. Okay, I want to make that clear. It's essentially people trying to work out what they want, what they need, what will be um, in the best interest of the country, their party, their constituency, whomever they represent. And a lot of people don't do that in public. That's just the nature of the beast. It's not it's not a conspiracy. Um, it's negotiation. It's most people don't negotiate in public. Okay, it's just the way things are done. All right, so let's go back here. And as a matter of fact, I never even heard of it. I'm going to be honest with you. But a lot of the stuff that's going on around QAnon, a lot of people were talking about QAnon. I never even heard of QAnon until I think this past summertime. Okay, so 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 essentially, but I have heard of conspiracy theories going back to the 70s. So this is not a new phenomenon in American politics or in American culture. It's part of our life. All right. I can remember hearing conspiracy theories like within 2 weeks of the bombing of the World Trade Center, of the 9/11. I can remember people coming in and saying, "Yeah, that was all staged," and I'm saying, "No, it wasn't." I actually have people I know who are in. Well, no, I don't. No, the government has staged all that. Okay, this is crazy, but this is what happens. This is what happens when we have bad communications or biased communications or communications which are filtered through a particular lens. Okay, so that's my media critique for this week. Feel free to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, or that, yeah, you're right on, Gary. That's what's happening. Okay, so we have a lot of lines in the United States. Wow. Okay, so we have interesting. We have a lot of lines happening over right in the middle of the country, including a kind of important Mars line, like right over here. Right, you see that down here? So this goes through the western United States, goes all the way down, just misses Tierra del Fuego down here, and comes back. Where's Mars? Where's my friend Mars? I view Mars as as a friendly planet. Mars is over here. Okay, so we have another Mars line going up through eastern India this time, and a little bit into China, and a little bit into eastern Russia. So the reason I focused on Mars was because it's independent in the chart. There are no other planets connected with Mars. Mars is in its own sign. So essentially, and there's a Mars line going right through, roughly through Western Ireland, Portugal, just off the coast of Portugal, down here through the Canaries. That's where my family, or close to the Canaries, where my family came from, or the Madeiras Islands, and through Western Africa. So, what do Mars lines means? Well, they mean fighting. They mean arguments. They mean guns. It's going through. It's sitting close to Mexico. Okay, the western side of Mexico. So that will mean some kind of either earth disturbances or um, or um, gun violence throughout Canada, central United States. We're talking about, looks like western Texas, mid to western Texas, and also a lot of activity down in South America, like right around here. Looks like, I don't know, that's Tijuana or not, but it's right around that area. The other areas, so those are the most areas for immediate violence or immediate violent activity. The other area you want to look at, so there are no lines close to the capital of the United States. The only one that is a Rahu line. So that essentially that just means a lot of publicity. So there'll be a lot of publicity around Florida, some panic around Florida, around Ohio, going up through. Um, it looks like Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, and into Western Canada. Now I know there is a recall effort going on in California, so we're probably going to be hearing a lot more about that. And I believe there's a recall effort going on in Michigan, although I'm not sure about that. So this will be political because there's a Mercury line there and a Sun line. So all these states are going to be involved in political issues, and parts of Mexico down here. Venus and Jupiter lines are normally pretty beneficial lines. So this part of the state over here looks like it's in pretty good shape. Saturn is in western Texas and into Arizona, so there'll be some hardship or some difficulty in the western states or in the uh, Idaho, North Dakota region. And the moon sign down here indicates some possibility of some flooding in Canada and Utah. Now, and also a highly public case. It looks like right in the middle of Nevada. So in Nevada, around Las Vegas, looks like there's going to be some very public trouble going on. Probably political. So this is where it's not Wyoming. Wyoming is over here. But Wyoming is going to be involved, so that's Representative Cheney's state, but not as involved as Arizona is. If we go over to and there's a Rahu line going straight through Brazil, so Brazil is going to have increasing cases and economic problems and increasing viral attacks. Hopefully, Brazil will be left alone pretty soon. They've gone through a lot. So we're talking about really the next few weeks. The moon is going over. The moon is really not interacting with a lot of planets, right? A lot of places right now, except for Australia and parts of Indonesia, right here. So essentially, there'll be a lot of activity in Australia, Indonesia, uh, maybe some problems with government. We know there are problems in government, and there may be even an uprising in Myanmar. It looks like from the chart. There's a Rahu line. So the Mars line is over here. It's next to Ireland, so there'll be some political trouble in Ireland and England, and possibly in Portugal and Spain, but definitely in Western Africa, uh, especially around here, especially around midway down the map. And finally, over here, I want to focus on this Rahu line. Some panic in Central Europe. I know the cases of the coronavirus have been increasing in Central Europe and Greece. It affects Turkey just a little bit, but there are no major lines going over Turkey right now. So Turkey's chart looks fairly insulated for the time being. I'm not expecting any really major issues for Turkey until around May or so. And I'll discuss those in a later broadcast. But basically, Libya, Egypt look like there'll be some changes in government or some disruption or some protests all the way down through South Africa. If we look over here there's a moon line that goes through Iran and its neighboring states, and let's see now. So there'll be a lot of public attention on Iran. That's definitely true. And in Western Europe, there's a Saturn line, so we could have some more hardships, some more weather hardships in Western India and up through middle Russia. And there are Venus and Jupiter lines right next to each other um, in India. So mostly the economy looks like it'll probably be going okay. But there are demonstrations I know going on right now in Delhi, and so that's probably what that Saturn line represents, the demonstrations of the farmers. And that won't end. I don't think that's going to end until around April or so, if I'm just looking astrologically. And Mercury is, so there'll be a lot of communications out of India and a lot of governmental authority, governmental push. But I think we can expect to see, in addition to the demonstration, some kind of political action uh, in Myanmar. And let's see now, we have a Rahu line going up over to South Korea, into Western Russia, and close to Japan. So essentially what that means to me is there'll be some disruption in or scandal in the Korean government over the next couple of weeks. We have Saturn lines, Venus lines, Jupiter lines, not interacting with a lot of property over here. They're close to New Zealand, but they're not quite on it. New Zealand looks pretty blessed right now. Western or Eastern Australia looks pretty blessed, but Middle Australia, I would expect there to be some kind of accidents or explosions or fires in this part of the country. Okay, so that's about it. So we're talking about a lot of activity, and the areas that have a lot of activity going on are really the western United States to and Mexico to Florida, but the Northeast seems largely left out of it. Northeastern United States seems largely left out of it. And in Europe, it looks like mainly Spain, Portugal, England, and Ireland, and Africa, Western Africa. And Middle Europe from essentially Sweden down through uh, Denmark, Austria, and Greece. That could present some problems for Turkey. Let's say there's an earthquake in Greece. That could present some problems. They may get some aftershocks over there, but that's really the major thing that Turkey will get involved in. But again, I don't think it'll cause any major damage. And over here, we have a lot of lines going over India and a little bit into China. So there should be some disruption in those two countries over the next few weeks. And last but not least, Australia is pretty much the only, and Korea should expect some scandal. Korea and Japan should expect some scandal in government. These lines interact with a lot of small Micronesian islands, and those people are important, but they're not going to affect large amounts of individuals. And I think overall from this chart, you're more likely to see some problems over Western Australia or Eastern Australia, excuse me, and Indonesia than almost anywhere else. Okay, so let's go back to the main chart. All right, so since we have a relatively isolated chart, I'm just going to give it like a summary, like a quick summary for each sign. Aries, very willful, very career oriented, very dominant this month. These next couple of weeks. Taurus, expect some difficulties with bosses and them piling a lot of work on you. Gemini, relationship life still doesn't look that great right now, but it'll improve once Jupiter enters Aquarius, August 27th. Also, luck will improve. Cancer has a lot of planets in the seventh house, so there's a lot of activity connected with relationship life and career life for this chart. This is a kind of a struggle between career and relationships. So there'll be a lot of pulling down on a person to get involved with a relationship, but not a lot of time. Leo has a lot of planets in the sixth house with a lot of enemies to overcome, but they can be overcome slowly but surely. Virgo has a lot of planets in the fifth house with a lot of focus on children and a lot of focus on inheritances and money and property for money. Libra has Mars in the seventh house, who will give kind of an aggressive relationship partner or kind of an angry relationship partner. And home life will seem to be a little bit disturbed or disrupted because of this focus of planets right here. But overall, good for career. For Scorpio, we have a lot of planets in the third house, so this sign will be inclined to take chances and inclined to take risks. They may even get involved in relationships outside of marriage. Doesn't necessarily mean all of them will, but they'll have a lot of responsibility thrust on them during this month, and a lot of courage, a lot of willingness to be brave. Um, Mars is in the sixth house, so they'll have a lot of enemies, and they'll have a lot of their own personal problems will hold them back. For Sagittarius, you have a lot of planets in the second house, especially Jupiter, the Lord of the first, is in the second, so that's a wealth-producing combination. So this sign should actually do pretty good monetarily. And in terms of career, in terms of children, arguments with kids, in terms of career, not really a lot happening, but not a lot needs to happen for this particular sign this month. It'll just all be focused on money. For Capricorn, a lot of pressure on the sign over the next couple of years, but this month in particular, and you'll see a lot of anger at home, a lot of fights at home, a lot of animosity. So just try to keep your cool. And like I said, just keep in mind what I was saying earlier on about making sure that you take advantage of things when things are in your favor. Aquarius, a lot of expenses, a lot of behind the scenes action for the sign, a lot of uncertainty about career options. They may be trying to go in too many directions at once, but also a lot of courage and a lot of ambition for the sign, but dissatisfaction with home life. And for Pisces will be kind of angry this month. Um, and that'll continue really for about another month, and then it'll calm down a little bit. And we'll get a lot of financial gains for Pisces in this chart, and unexpected problems from bosses. So that's it for this week. This may end up running a few minutes short because I didn't give a lot of detail on the actual signs, but with the signs, I'd encourage you. The major things I'd encourage you to watch out for is number one, uncontrolled um, tempers, because tempers are going to be very short this month. Over the next few weeks in particular, things will calm down a little bit by Friday. I think you'll find, and about 2 weeks after that, things will get a little bit slower. But people are going to be very rigid, very, very dogmatic over the next year or so. I'm thinking, and also in terms of your particular chart, keep in mind that relationship life is going to be difficult for a lot of signs this um, pretty much up until about a month from now. Then you'll see different signs have relationship problems. With Mars and Aries, it's kind of a potent combination. We have two great personality yogas. We have a Mars great personality yoga, which is essentially a positive yoga. It's good for getting what you want, but it's also good at alienating people. And we have Saturn, which is again good for getting what you want, but it is always done in the most pleasant way. So Saturn's in Capricorn and Mars is in Aries, so it'll start a change or a movement towards more restrictive behavior, both planets. So I think that although I can see that, I don't see that lasting a long time, no more than, let's say, uh, maybe another 2 years. And then you'll start to see a gradual loosening, a gradual liberalization, unless they're forced into it. I think when you see Mars hit this sign, which will be in about another, um, or Mars hit Scorpio or Mars hit Capricorn, which will be in about another, let me see now, 2.5, 2.5. In about another 3 months, you'll see some explosiveness, and also about 9 months from now. So that's going to be kind of a challenging time for the United States. Okay, I'm going to sign off. This has been Gary Gomes. As always, if you can ring the bell, leave comments, um, pass it on to friends if you like what I'm doing. Give me some suggestions for other things you'd like me to cover. I'd love that. And hopefully next week we'll be back with a Chinese horoscope, so you can look at that in addition to the regular Vedic horoscope that I do for you folks. And peace, and we'll see you soon. And namaste. God bless everyone. All right, goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much for watching.